The focus on happiness, enjoyment, and memory making is probably far more important than focusing on grades, on academic achievement, on university admissions.
The child will still be able to attend the college, but is that a gap?
This is currently a challenge. And one of the things the heads of the IB schools across India are working on and lobbying the IB management and organisation about is whether there's any way that we can get the IB May examination results out a little bit sooner. My first advice to any parent, any student joining the IB, choose subjects that you're passionate about and you're going to enjoy learning.
When we talk about converting the IB score into Indian educational system, which is percentile,
this is a very interesting challenge.
Sports is inclusive in IB curriculum. Have you come across a child who's taken up sports as a profession?
How happy is your child? Because that should be more important than anything else. Parents who are constantly on their phone are a terrible inspiration for their child. It's the worst kind of role modelling. If students do complete the IB and want to do the competitive exams but study for them after they've finished the IB, they could take a gap year and work on them subsequently. But it is currently a challenge.
Does it really make a difference if the school is having all the years put together? Welcome to Yellow Slate podcast. Today we have with us Mr. Tony Wright, Principal of Manchester Global School, Hyderabad. Hello, Mr. Wright.
Hi, thank you for having me.
The question that is on the top of all the parents today is what exactly IB curriculum is all about and how is it different from the other curriculums that we have?
The best way to look at the IB is a curriculum that's a framework curriculum. It's not an off-the-shelf textbook curriculum like CBSE or the ICSE or the state board exams. It is a curriculum framework that provides the school with direction on what skills to develop and when to develop them, but it allows every school to design units of learning and assessment tools that can focus on the school's vision and mission. So it's a highly rigorous set of programs that runs from the primary years program in nursery all the way up to the middle years program, which runs from grade 6 to grade 10. And finally, there are a choice of programs for pre-university, either the IB Diploma program, which is probably a slightly more academic, broad program with 6 different subjects, or there's the career-related program, which allows students to dive into a little bit more depth into certain areas before they go off to university. And I think the main differences in the approaches are the philosophy around assessment, whereas a CBSE or a state board would be very heavy on exam assessment. The IB empowers the students who maybe are not specialists at exams by assessing them through presentation skills, through extended written work, and that enables students who need a more varied approach to shine to be able to do that.
So, Mr. Tony, how important, according to you, is choosing a right curriculum for a child is, and how is it going to path his way into the educational system?
So I think this is a real challenge for parents because every child is different and every family pathway for that child, every vision that the parents have will be slightly different from family to family. And the IB is a pathway to pretty much anything you like here in India. It can be a pathway to international education, but it's equally valid as an application pathway to Indian universities. There are very big differences. For example, when students are applying to Indian universities, the competitive exams are very important, whereas a student who maybe is not very strong in examinations might be more inclined towards the pathways that don't involve as much examination. And that could be that they're looking at some of the universities here in India that are more liberal and more modern in terms of the likes of Ashoka and Flame, Symbiosis, and some of the Masters Union and Tetra, the new universities, new generation of universities that are more about the hands-on learning, micro-credentials, and that's the kind of education that you might pursue if you're looking outside of India as well. So the IB can be a pathway for both avenues, but it really enables students to use different approaches to their learning. And I think that that's what I try and guide parents to look at: your child's skill set, their interests, what's going to be the best fit for them, that they're going to enjoy their learning, because that's when they're going to be most successful.
So you'll be talking about IB as a curriculum. It's going to get the child with hands-on learning or learning with real life scenarios. Can you just explain one topic that is taught in PYP and MYP, as you said? Can you just explain how is it taught in IB?
I can give a couple of examples. If we look at the PYP in the primary years, the learning is broken up into units. And in each grade level, they look at units, for example, how the world works.
Okay.
How the world works is looking at how certain elements might exist around the students. It could be bringing in parts of science, parts of social studies, and then building the English skills, the math skills around what they're looking at within that. And that enables the teacher to look at concepts that might be very relevant on a local scale, and then how they scale up to a more global scale. Now, if you look at the middle years program, let's take an example of an individuals and societies, so conventionally humanities. A topic that we might look at in grade 6 might be the agricultural revolution. How has agriculture changed from many thousands of years ago, where it was hunter-gatherer approaches to finding food, hunting animals to get protein, and taking from the earth in terms of plants and so on. How has that evolved to today's modern farming approaches with sustainable agriculture, looking at arable farming of crops? How is that done here in Hyderabad and in Telangana, compared to how it might be done in the US or Canada, where the highly mechanized approaches have taken over from the relatively small scale farms that you get here? And helping the students understand how that has evolved and how that feeds into both business and economics is really helpful to building the skills and the understanding that they need by the time they enter the IB diploma program, where they might look in more detail at the microeconomics of agriculture, the macroeconomics of global trade in agriculture, and all of that fits together for what the universities are looking for, which are students with skills that understand what the primary years started looking at, how the world works. So it all builds on top of each other. And all of the curriculum from IB is backward planned. So when you look at the content of the IB diploma program specifically, the content, the skills that are looked at in grades 11 and 12 are planned for what students will need at university. And then the teachers in the schools backward plan the units, taking into account the school's vision and mission, and helping the teachers and the students to then learn in a sequential way, where they're building on the foundational skills of literacy and numeracy in nursery and early years to fill all the gaps up to the skill level needed to go to university. And that will look different in a school here in Hyderabad, to a school in Mumbai, to a school in Cairo in Egypt, to a school in the middle states of America. So essentially, we're all aiming for the same goal, the IB diploma exams in grade 12, but we're all building a curriculum for our school that suits the community around it.
Okay. So the way you're saying is, when a school is said to be following an IB curriculum, each school gets to have their own curriculum set?
So essentially, the assessments that are done throughout the school are based on what the school designs within their own framework. So the IB provides that structure of skills, but then the topics of the units can look a little bit different. And that enables the schools to focus on the local culture, local languages, local environment and resources, but they are expected to look at it both on the local context and compare it with examples globally, local to global. It's helping the students understand where they are in the world and then how the learning is applicable across the world, because things are done a little bit differently. Agriculture was the example I used just before. Farming techniques in Europe may be different to the farming techniques in Australasia, that may be very different to the farming techniques here in Telangana.
Yeah.
And I think that enabling the students to explore that and to compare that is really important, because when they reach a university, whether it's a university here in India or a university somewhere else in the world, it enables them to have conversations and to do research about the whole world and not just about the little tiny space that they've occupied in it.
So the teachers are the ones who design these units for the children?
Yeah, correct. So all the teachers in the IB go through quite a rigorous training and selection process. I look for teachers who have the ability to engage students in interesting ways, that have a good understanding of what good pedagogy is, good learning techniques and approaches. And then what we do is we make sure that they are trained by the IB to understand the assessment requirements, to understand what the skills are that we want the students to have. And then we sit them down together in teams. The teachers collaborate regularly to design the units of learning for our school, for Manchester Global School, that fit our needs. You know, the needs of my students here in Manchester Global School are different to the students that I had in the school in Dubai, that are different to the students that I had in Mumbai, that are different to the ones I had in Switzerland. So therefore, it's right that the activities, that the learning approaches are different for every learning community. And the IB gives that freedom to the schools to design it. But the rigor of the assessment throughout has to meet certain levels. And that's why the IB come and visit the schools on a regular basis. Every 5 years, they come and assess, inspect, if you like, and evaluate the programs. They look at assessment. They look at the skills that are being addressed. They make sure that you're exceeding some quite high standards. And that's why the universities around the world see the IB as a really rigorous program or set of programs that more than adequately prepare students for universities. And if you look at students that take admission, particularly in the US, if they've come through an IB diploma program, very often they're given advanced credits. That means that they start university in a position where they can really, focus on what they want to focus on, because they already have a wider, broader, stronger skill set than students from many other curricula.
So there's a myth among parents that IB do not have textbooks. Is it a myth or a
It
fact?
absolutely is a myth. I think this comes from the olden days of the IB, go back 20 years, when some of the programs, PYP and MYP, were relatively new. And schools literally had to create their own curriculum. It's absolutely a myth about textbooks. Go back 20 years, and yes, there were less resources available for PYP and MYP, the middle years program and primary years program, because they were very new areas of learning, very new programs for the IB. These days, the IB has remodeled the curriculum and the skills that are required, and they do have textbooks that are available for pretty much all the subjects, which give the teachers an additional resource. So what I look for in my teachers at Manchester Global School is that they will create some resources. They will find resources that are available through textbooks in the library, through resources that are available online, through documentary films, whatever is most useful and is going to inspire the students the most. And then the textbooks are also there for practicing exercises, for looking at model assessment questions that the students may have to prepare for grade 10. And very much so in the diploma program. Textbooks have been around forever for the diploma program, and they are a valuable part of the learning process. But we also have online learning platforms where we can adapt assessment as students go, that give the students a more interactive and faster feedback, which is really the most important part of learning.
Right. So the teachers have to be really good when it has to be IB curriculum, right?
Absolutely. I think if you go beyond the IB curriculum, if you look at the most important factors in terms of a student's success in any curriculum, it comes down to the relationship with the teacher. There's a professor from Melbourne University called John Hattie, a New Zealander, who's done some massive scale studies of academic research, and the biggest the biggest factor that impacts learning for any student of any age is the relationship they have with their teacher. So when I go out to interviewing teachers for my schools, I'm looking for teachers who are going to inspire the students, who are going to be approachable, and who students will be happy to go to for extra help if they're struggling, who the students will know the teacher will stretch them if they're really good in a subject area. And I think that teachers who have that creative spark are challenging to find, particularly in a culture where the vast majority of teachers have come from a curriculum that is textbook related. To deliver something that is very different to the experience you've had in your own schooling is a challenge. So it's almost like trying to take them and almost erase some of the experience they've had and then rebuild an inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning is a big challenge. And that's why creating a school like Manchester Global School has been such an exciting project, to find teachers, some with experience of doing this and others that we're bringing in and training them how to do it, but who already have that spark in the way that they interact with students, is really fundamental to helping students get onto that progression of their learning, which helps them to shine and stand out by the time they're going off to university.
So, Mr. Tony, what is the core of IB?
That's a very good question. For each of the different programs, the primary years program, middle years program, and diploma program, there are models or diagrams that contain concentric circles. And at the very heart of each of those diagrams, we talk about the IB learner profile. These are a set of characteristics or attributes that enable the student to fulfill a very full life. It's things like being a risk taker and helping the students to understand that risk taking isn't about walking along a tightrope or walking along the edge of a cliff. It's about trying new things. It's about pushing yourself to learn outside your comfort zone. Then there are things like caring and being a carer. How do you demonstrate through your learning that you care about other people, the environment, animals, and how do you care about your community? When you think about knowledgeable, knowledge can be demonstrated in a number of ways. It can be demonstrated through exams, but it can also be demonstrated in the conversations that you have with your parents when your parents come to see the learning in your classroom. So that learner profile and the 10 attributes of that are at the crux and at the core of the learning for all the students. Now, as you go through the programs, there are also other elements in the core, such as the primary years exhibition, which allow the students to demonstrate skills like communication and research. They develop in rigor and in excitement factor as you go through the school. So when you're in middle years, you've got things like community projects, like the personal project, which expands on the PYP exhibition, but it allows the student to focus on something that they are passionate about. Could be sports, could be fashion, could be history, could be cooking. Whatever the students love doing, they can focus on and turn it into a project that can help them in terms of promoting their own profile when it comes to university applications, or can prepare them for when they're in the IB diploma program and they have to write a 4,000-word university standard research paper, the extended essay. They have to focus on creativity, action, and service, which is a combination of things like sports, events management, events planning, service to the community. All of that stems right the way through. They're introduced to those elements in the primary years. By the time they're in the diploma program, these are real sources of evidence for their university applications, and it's building the skills and the interests that we hope will transcend their learning throughout life. And I think that that's such an important development in youngsters, to give them a very broad approach to life, that they're not just about academics, not only about sports, but they can blend these things together to make interesting young adults.
Right. So, how do I try and teach my 5-year-old caring, especially? Or how is it done in IB when you're talking about caring?
So I think when we look at 5-year-olds and we're talking about caring, the whole process of social integration with other children is about learning how to care for one another. When you bring children together in a classroom environment for the first time in nursery and in early years, they are learning literally how to share the resources, how to share their toys.
Yes.
And by allowing another child to use the toy that you've been using, you are sharing a caring approach. Teachers will often start the day by asking the students how they are feeling. And when a student comes into school and is maybe feeling a little bit sad that they're missing their mum this morning, the other children showing empathy, understanding, and caring to make the other child feel better, that's the basics of learning about those values and those attributes that make up the learner profile. And that's done through play-based learning, it's done through role modeling, through play acting, and the teachers are carefully trained to develop that kind of understanding, as well as the writing, as well as the numbers. It's a major part of what we need to focus on.
When we are talking about sports, especially, not all schools have Zen like swimming pools and the world class amenities. Saying that, as a parent, how do I know that when I'm sending my child to an IB school, that this school is really going to live up to the IB core value that it stands for?
I think there's a couple of points to take away from that question. I think the first one is that the IB is a curriculum that schools can adapt to the resources they have around them. Just because a school offers the IB curriculum doesn't mean they have to be a sports specialist school. And, I've got a big passion for sports. I've been very blessed that the schools that I've worked in, the school that I currently work in, they have fantastic sports facilities. That's been important to me. But I'm well aware of schools that offer the IB curriculum that do not have those kind of sports facilities. And they still offer a very broad selection of subjects. They offer alternatives in terms of they may not have a swimming pool, but they maybe offer track and field athletics, or they offer the ability to go outside of school to find sports as part of the CAS element of creativity, action and service parts of the learning. I think that when a parent goes to a school, it's about looking at the promises that the school makes, the vision and mission that they have for their learners, and talking to other members of the community, whether it's teachers, whether it's other parents, to make sure that they're delivering what they say they deliver. And that, to me, is the key. Every school is different. Fee structures are different. It's all about what the school is able to do that's different for your child, that your child needs. Because not every child is sporty, not every child is a bookworm, not every child is a mathematician, but it's making sure that there are opportunities for your child to shine in whatever field they are a specialist in.
Right. As a parent, how do I know that the vision that the promoter has is exactly the vision that the principal has? And together as a team, they're able to support and encourage the teachers to follow the vision. But how do I know that the teacher in my child's class is following the same vision?
I think there's a component of this that is trust. I think that you've got to find a school where you feel that you can trust the promoter, the principal, in that they are delivering what they say. You will get some information from the website. You will get information from reviews. More and more schools now are sharing Google reviews, parent reviews, to demonstrate that they are delivering what parents are buying into. Because fundamentally, as a private school, an IB school will I think all schools in India are private schools that are delivering the IB. I think that they are realizing that in order to gain that trust, you have to share communication between current families and the families that are looking at joining the school. I think looking at where students end up when they graduate from IB schools is also very helpful to parents, because the prospect, understanding which kind of universities they go to, is fundamentally the product that the parents are looking for. You're looking for what's going to happen to my child when they go to a school like this. Where will they end up? Will they be happy? Will I be happy with that? So I think that those are the things that I'd be looking at as a parent, looking prospectively at schools, is do I trust the promoter and the principal? Do I see people that are happy with what they're gaining from this school?
Mr. Anthony, as a parent, when I was trying to do a little research for my child, there are certain schools that claim that they have the certificate. But when I go to the IB website, the mention of the school, few of them have only for primary, for the middle, few of them have for all the years. Does it really make a difference if the school is having all the years put together?
Okay, so this is a very interesting question, because schools can pick and choose which programs they will offer.
Okay.
So an established school might have primary years program from nursery to grade 5. They may then offer something different, like the Cambridge from grade 6 to 10. And then they might have the IB Diploma program as an option for grade 11 and 12. That's entirely acceptable. But that school would not be considered to be a continuum school. A continuum school is an IB school that offers all the programs or sufficient programs for a child to start in nursery and be an IB learner all the way through from nursery to grade 12. That's a continuum school. So my current school is becoming a continuum school. As a new school, you cannot get your authorization for the PYP or the MYP, the primary or middle years programs, until you've been open for at least a year. The IB get you to set up the school, they get you to open, and you buy into the fact that you're an IB school, you teach to an IB framework curriculum, and they will come and assess after 1 year that you are delivering that curriculum to their standards. That's part of an evaluation and authorization process, which ensures high quality. The IB diploma program is a little bit different. To deliver the IB diploma program or the careers related program, you have to demonstrate to the IB that you have everything in place before you start it. And that's why a school like my current school, NGS, we've got our DP fully authorized. We are about to get our MYP authorization visit. And that means that within the next few weeks, we will be MYP authorized. And we're in the process of sorting out the visit for the primary years program, which we'll probably do by the end of this term. It doesn't mean that our programs are not ready. They are ready. But the IB cannot assess them until you're in the process of delivering it, because they need to see, they need to come in and watch lessons happening. They need to speak to parents to find out whether the parents are happy with the learning. They need to see the students in their learning. So I think in many ways makes it a really rigorous process of evaluation to make sure that everything is in place and that the programs are of a high quality. So that's why you'll find some schools that are fully authorized for Continuum because they've been around for 3, 4, 5 or more years. But it'll also explain how you've got schools that have one program fully authorized and are candidate schools for the other programs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So does it actually make a difference if a child is going to IB right from the nursery till 12th, or if a child joins in 5th or 6th grade? Does it actually make a difference?
Yes, I think it does. I think that the approach to learning that the child develops will be very, very inquisitive. If they're brought into that environment at the youngest possible age, they're going to be more inquiry driven. They're going to ask more questions in life generally. Is it going to affect their ability to score well at the end of 12th? Probably not. I've had lots of students in my schools who've come from other curricula, even as late as grade 11. They've come in from CBSE or State Board into an IB-DP environment, and they've done brilliantly. So every child is different. That process of transition from a different curriculum can happen pretty much at any point up to 11th, but the longer they're immersed in that kind of learning environment, the more they will develop those skills at a younger age, and they will be able to enjoy the learning in a hands-on, conceptually driven way for longer. So it doesn't really matter when they transition, but I think if I were putting my child in, I'd try and get them in from nursery.
So it actually makes a difference on how the child takes the subject.
Yeah, I think so. I think it has more of an impact on their personality and character development than it does on their ability to perform in academics.
Mr. Tony, you were talking about children getting into sports and other extracurricular activities. As parents, we really want our child to do something different or something more. But picking a child, sending a child to the school, coming back, and then sending the child to a sports class, then immediately music class or a dance class. Do you think parents today are doing it a little more?
I do see changes. The conversations that I'm having now are conversations that are a little different to what I was having, 9 years ago when I first moved to India. I think more parents are talking about mental health. More parents are talking about having students who have a balanced approach to life and that have interests outside of academics. And I think that that's a reflection on what's happened since the pandemic. There are a lot of statistics and a lot of evidence to show that there is a mental health crisis going on among students. And I think looking for a school that provides access to a range of activities after school that have a range of different subjects, more varied than the basic core of lessons, I think that helps parents to know that the school is stimulating the child and providing opportunities that will help them to let out their anger, to explore the world around them beyond their academics. And that's going to help with mental health. I think that one of the things I'd be looking for as a parent going to any new school is, what what level of pastoral, social emotional care is available for my child? If they do encounter a crisis of mental health, what support will I get from that school? Does the school understand what mental health in teens really looks like? And I think that that is something that more and more parents are looking for. And I think finding a school that has opportunities is really important.
When I am trying to get an admission for my daughter in a school, do I see a school which has a mandate of counselor or anybody whom the child can approach? Or is it like a luxury that the school can give me?
I think these days, I think in terms of private schools offering any of the international boards, whether it's Cambridge, whether it's IB, whether it's an international with CBSE, I think it's an expectation that those schools should have some sort of counselling service available, whether that's on site or a link up with an external agency that they can send families to. But I think it's really important, and it's something that I've become more and more involved with here in India. I'm involved with an organisation called IC3, which is a global organisation now that stemmed out of India that looks at counselling for both careers counselling and social emotional counselling. And they've got groups within that are looking at all sorts of different areas, including areas like suicide prevention. You know, that is a massive topic it's a topic of debate and discussion at the moment that is very, very important. With statistics rapidly rising, schools that are not looking at mental health of their children and providing the right support, they're becoming fewer and fewer. Everyone is aware of the problem, whether it's talked about or not within the community is almost by the by, but so long as the leaders of the school and the staff of the school and the students of the school and the parents understand where to go for support, then I think that you're in a good place.
Mr. Anthony, when it comes to IB, the children have to select their subjects in grade 9?
So yeah, in many ways it's similar to the IGCSEs in that towards the halfway point in grade 8, we'll have conversations with the students, get them to start thinking about which areas they're most interested and passionate about and what subjects they might want to choose for assessment through grades 9 and 10. It's better if they're continuous through 9 and 10, though you can change before you start 10th. The assessment in grade 10 is something called the e-assessment. So these are a little bit like IGCSE or 10th standard exams that happen at the end of 10th grade, except with the IB, they're done electronically. A number of subjects like an exam, so maths, English, individuals and societies, sciences, they're all done as an e-exam. Then there are subjects where they submit a portfolio. So for subjects like design, physical health education, they are music, portfolio based. So they submit a portfolio of evidence that shows the learning and the skill development that they've undergone throughout a substantial period of time during grade 10. And that enables the IB to standardize and look at what my students have done in my school, compare it to students around the world, and then allocate grades so that we know where we are, where the students are, compared to students elsewhere. Now, in some IB schools, they may choose not to do that. Because we're authorized, we'll be able to present our students with a certificate of completion for the MYP, the middle years program, that universities around the world know we've met a certain standard for the IB at the end of 10th. That can take away the pressure for those students who may not be suitable for lots of high pressure exams. They still have to complete internal exams and internal work to get the completion certificate and our internal grades. And those grades in 9th and 10th for admission to universities that look at a transcript through high school, we've got internal grades for those, which we would have whether we did the e-assessments or not. But the e-assessments allow schools to compare their students with students from other schools very, very readily. And that can be a selection process for DP subjects, for the selection of subjects across the IB diploma program, but it doesn't have to be that way.
So a grade 10 student can have 6 subjects or 6 groups, I would say. One is in English, it's compulsory. So the compulsory subjects in IB are English, math, second language, and one of your sciences, one of your humanities, and one of your arts, which include all the other. Am I right?
So that's true for the IB diploma program. When it's the 10th standard, 10th grade assessments, they can complete something called the e-certificate, which requires a minimum of 5 different subjects.
Okay.
And that would be English, maths, a science, a humanities, and design or an arts portfolio or a PHE portfolio. But they can do more than that. And that's the joy of it. It can be more if they're more talented, more skilled, but the 5 is the minimum that they would do for the e-certificate.
Okay. The 5 win minimum with all these subjects, can the child drop math and pick all the 3 sciences?
They would have to keep the maths. They could do the 3 sciences if the school timetable allowed it, and that would be helpful if, for example, they're applying to do medicine here in India. So there are schools that offer that, and I think that that's important to keep in mind, that the IB is designed with the Indian universities in mind as well. When they move to the IB diploma program, you were right, it is 6 subjects. Maths is 1, English or first language, a second language. Then you're looking at the humanities or individuals and societies, things like business, economics, sciences. They can choose 1 or more of the sciences, which can include computer science or design technology, as well as the traditional sciences. Environmental systems is in there. The 6th subject is a really interesting area. For a pure diploma, then yes, an arts-based music, visual arts, theatre, film would be there, but they can drop that in favour of a second science, and there is the potential to get a special diploma where you can do all 3 sciences if you do want to go into medicine here in India.
Okay.
So that is a possibility.
Okay. So when my child is in IBDP, that is grade 11 and 12, my child has to do 6 subjects, that is compulsory, along with the arts,
Arts is not compulsory.
Arts
They do not have to do an arts subject for the IB diploma. Many students choose not to do an arts, and they might pick up a second science. They might do chemistry and biology. They might do economics and business management. Different schools allow different possibilities of combinations. But for a pure diploma, then a student would do an arts subject, which I love to see, because it just gives them that element of creativity that I think is going to be more and more important in the future workplace.
But a second language is a compulsory for a grade 11 and 12 child in IB, yes?
Yes, and there are different options. So a child who wants to pick up a new language might be able to pick up, for example, French ab initio or Spanish ab initio, something from the beginning. So working on the basics, hopefully get them up to the standard that they can have a conversation in it over the 2 years. If they've been learning throughout the 5 years of MYP, or even longer, if you offer those languages in PYP, then the hope would be that they would choose that language as what we call a B language, where hopefully we can get them up to a standard where they could, if they were to choose to go and study in one of those countries. There are other possibilities. You could choose to do a second first language. So in some schools, you would be able to do Telugu literature alongside English language and literature. And that would enable the student to demonstrate proficiency, high-level proficiency in 2 mother tongues, if you like. And that's particularly common in schools like the one I worked in Switzerland, where many students had a fluency in a mother tongue that we didn't have a teacher for, but they could do a self-taught program of literature. And that enabled them to get something called a bilingual diploma, which shows us a skill set. And when we think about the global dynamics of the world and engaging with different people for business, actually very helpful.
So what happens if a child doesn't perform as well as the child expected to perform in IB diploma?
So I think that there's a couple of things to take into account with that particular question. I think depending on whether there's one subject or multiple subjects they feel that they've underperformed in. So if a student underperforms in the May 2026 exams, they've effectively got 2 more sessions, November 2026 and May 2027, to do retakes. So if they're not happy with the grades, they could retake them in time for entry to university the following year. It's pretty unusual, but I've worked with students who maybe they've gone through a bereavement, maybe they've been ill during the exams, or maybe they've just not worked hard enough and they've decided to take a gap year to fill in those gaps in their scores to help them get into the university that they want to go to. So there are pathways and options like that. The other way to look at it is that looking at where they are applying to university and the requirements, a good college counsellor will hopefully be guiding them so that they've got multiple options. We often talk in terms of a reach university, somewhere that's really ambitious, that would be great for them to get into, and it challenges them to work really hard. Then you've got the band of universities that's a good fit, and we'd expect them to reach those grades. And then there's an insurance option that they may be looking at in terms of, okay, if I don't quite perform and I fall a little bit short, then I've got a backup option. So if I need to go for the 1 year attempt at getting into university, then they can do that. So there's different opportunities for students who may underperform.
So, Mr. Tony, once the child is finished 12th from IB, that is IBDP, the child is able to apply to any Indian universities. True or false?
True.
When the child is passed out of IBDP program, the child is eligible to attend any of the Indian competitive exams like JEEE, NEET, IIT, all of these exams. Is the child eligible to write?
Yes, they are. Because the universities accept the IB as a secondary school qualification in 12th, the students can prepare for those exams alongside the IB diploma. It's a lot of hard work, but there are some students who decide to do that because they enjoy the IB way of learning, but they're also really, really good at memory-based exams and can align that nicely for themselves. Unusual, but special.
Okay. But when the child is out of IBDP, the results are out in July or August, if I'm not mistaken. And the MSET or the NEET results are out, let's say, May or June. The child at least will not be called for the first interview. The child will still be able to attend the college. But is that a gap?
This is currently a challenge, and one of the things that the heads of the IB schools across India are working on and lobbying the IB management and organisation about is whether there's any way that we can get the IB May examination results out a little bit sooner, because it's only a matter of days.
Yes.
If we can get those results out sooner, then it's a fair competition between the IB graduates and the 12th from State Board, CBSE and ICSE. So it's something we're working really hard to try and align. The other way to look at it is that if students do complete the IB and want to do the competitive exams but study for them after they've finished the IB, they could take a gap year and work on them subsequently. But it is currently a challenge.
Yeah. But it is okay if my child wants to take a gap year. Yes?
I would encourage it. I think that one of the opportunities that you get from a gap year is to get experience of the world, do internships, really focus on deciding what's going to make you happy in life. And the majority of students that I've worked with that have taken a gap year, whether it's in India preparing for the competitive exams, whether it's in India getting work experience that they can put in applications for international universities, all of those students have ended up more mature, better prepared, and have gone on with confidence to the next step of their journey without it feeling rushed, without them feeling too young and underprepared. And because so many students complete 12th grade in India at the age of 17, I think that that's a really important confidence boost for the parents, that students can be really well prepared after a gap year to go abroad.
So it is okay.
Yes, I think it is.
Okay. Most of the parents want to move the child to IB curriculum in 11th and 12th, assuming that it is easy. Can you just tell us?
So I've got a lot of experience in handling that transition. And I think one of the mistakes that parents can make with good intention is that the actual workload of 11th and 12th in the IB is huge, particularly if the students are looking at a range of different pathways to university. In addition to the 6 subjects that the students have, they have their extended essay, 4,000-word research paper of university standards. Then they've got the theory of knowledge, preparing an exhibition about how we know what we know. That's quite conceptually challenging for most teenagers.
That is TOK.
TOK, that's TOK. And then you've got the creativity, activity and service element, which is about project management, running sports teams. It's about long-term commitment to evidencing what you're passionate about in life. Put all of that together and you've got a really challenging program. And that's why universities love it. And then you come to the universities themselves. And many parents, particularly here in India, that I've come across want to have their child have options at the end of 12th. And therefore, they're looking at applications to Indian universities, US universities, UK universities, Australian universities, European universities. It becomes a never-ending list. Singapore, Hong Kong. It can be a wonderful adventure, but it can also be a very time-consuming. And you've got to have children that can manage their time really well if you're going to help them apply to all of that wide range of different opportunities. And advice to parents that I would give is to think carefully at the very beginning of 11th. Try and narrow down, geographically at least, as to where your child should apply to. Try and keep it to 2 countries. You as a family know if you've got family connections in one place that might be good for your child to be near. If you've got a completely open plan, a completely blank canvas, have a conversation about climate, about culture, and look at what will be a good fit for your child. Because the more countries you apply to, the more different systems, the more different tasks you have to complete to submit, and that can stretch a child too thinly, so thinly that it can reduce their academic performance, it can reduce the quality of the work that they do. So that's a conversation I always have with parents that come and talk to me about grade 11 entry coming in from another curriculum. Don't under-anticipate the workload. Be very careful about that one.
So each university requires a different profile. Is that what you're saying?
Even within India, you've got the state universities that are looking at the rankings in the competitive exams. You've got private universities that are looking at, similar to the US, they look at transcript. They look at individual entrance exam preparation that is not part of the ranking system. That's a challenge. Helping the child prepare to apply through multiple systems and getting them thinking in different ways for those applications is huge. And it's the same globally. Even in the US, there are direct application universities that are not part of the Common App system. In the UK, most of the universities are on UCAS, a platform that enables students to upload one set of applications for 5 different universities. But if you've got children applying across 3 or 4 different countries, there could be, even in just 10 universities, you could be looking at 9 or 10 different application formats, different documents, different portfolios that need to be uploaded. All of that takes up time and energy when you really want to focus on getting those academic grades so that the transcript and final IB diploma are the best scores possible.
So as parents, we need to have the conversation before 11th grade on the universities.
I'd say that certainly by the end of term 1 in 11th grade, narrowing it down is very, very helpful. Working with a school careers counsellor, college counsellor is very important because they can help guide on what the challenges that lie ahead with each different application system. They will help the child approach the universities they're interested in to find out what that process looks like for that particular university. And I think that, again, the challenge that parents face, particularly in a culture where external counsellors, private counsellors, in some cases have a high level of promise, parents can be very tempted to work in a contradictory way than the school. Going to a private counsellor while your child is also getting counselling in school can double that workload again, because they could be talking about very different processes, very different opportunities. And narrowing it down between for the parent to help the student narrow down, are you going to work with a school counsellor or are you going to work outside of school with a private counsellor? That's an important decision because it helps the child know who to focus on. Because if they're being split between 2 counsellors, the advice can be misaligned, the advice can be confusing, and the workload again can be very, very high. So making wise decisions around university counselling options is an important part that the school should be involved in helping guide you on.
What if a grade 10 student really do not know what they want to study?
Well, that's where the IB is great, because my first advice to any parent, any student joining the IB, choose subjects that you're passionate about and you're going to enjoy learning. The world is not what it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago when we were studying. It's not a case anymore of going, right, engineering, I need to do my higher level maths, higher level physics, I'm going to be an engineer for the rest of my life. Yes, there are still opportunities in engineering. That's undeniable. But more and more people are choosing careers that change. They need to be flexible, adaptable, resilient. And you can do that with any combination of subjects. The chances are if you choose subjects you enjoy, you'll get better grades. And therefore, more doors are going to be open to you than choosing subjects, traditional subjects that are going to be big stretch of ability. Take higher level maths courses, for example. They're designed for a significantly small part of the population to find accessible. And you get many more students choosing to do the higher level maths because it's perceived that that will help them get into a top university. Well, it will if you get a good grade, but if you fail the course, it doesn't help at all. Having a standard level maths with a good grade and an exceptional grade in maybe art might be a better way to become an architect than it would be doing higher level maths and physics to become a structural engineer. So it's about looking at different pathways, looking at different options that enable students to shine.
That's very interesting. When we talk about converting the IB score into Indian educational system, which is percentile, what I've read is when a child gets a complete 7, when it's converted, it still ranks up to 90 or 95%. Why is that difference? And does that really make a difference?
This is a very interesting challenge because when we think about the rankings of the competitive exams here in India, when you're talking about entry to the most popular courses, the medicine, the engineering, you're talking about what, top 1%, 2% maybe? If you look at the IB scores, to actually be a top 1% student, you're looking at scoring 45 out of 45. And out of the 150, 170,000 IB students globally every year, maybe 200 students will get those 45 points. So to convert an individual 7 into 100% doesn't work. You've got to understand the big picture of the overall achievement. And that's where the challenge is in the conversions. And that's why students find it challenging when they're using the IB to compare directly to CBSE percentages and then to rankings. It's a very different approach or different philosophy to assessment.
Mr. Anthony, IB schools are the most expensive schools, at least in India. Can you tell us why and how?
They are, and there's no denying that the investment that the parents are making is something that they'll be considering very carefully. I think IB teachers require a lot more professional development in an ongoing way, whereas a state or government curriculum may be updated once every 10 or 15 years. The IB programs update their requirements and update the approaches that they follow on a very regular basis. The requirements for the authorization by the IB head office require schools to be up to date with the training of all of their staff. And that goes beyond just the classroom teachers, but also to things like the librarian, the counsellors, so that they're achieving the highest possible standards. So that professional development costs more. Then you look at the resources that are required. For conceptual hands-on learning, you need more resources. You need more creative materials, you need more trips, you need more books, you need more platforms. There are so many more elements to the learning in an IB school than there are where you just take a textbook off a shelf and learn from the textbook and have an occasional trip. So I think all in, it is more of an investment, but I think that the product at the end, the child that comes out at the end of an IB education, is quite different in terms of skill set, in terms of confidence, in terms of overall ability to face the world than they might be if they've come through a different curriculum. That's obviously dependent on the parenting, the family situation as well. But I think you get a very complete package with an IB school.
IB teachers earn more than Cambridge or CBSE teachers, yes?
Generally speaking, yes. I think that comes down to the fact that they are expected to be very skilled in a wider number of areas. To sit a child down and get them to write an exam and mark it is one skill. To prepare them for presentations, to build their confidence in public speaking, to help them understand how to use technology to produce videos, how to produce high quality presentations. I think that all of that is a wider skill set than you'd expect from a teacher in other curricula where there is less varied approach to assessment. I think that the competitive element in terms of the number of IB schools that are growing at the moment, I think that's another challenge that schools face, and that is part of the reason to pay teachers more is to help retain them, because you as a parent don't want to see your child's teacher changing every year without good reason. You know, there are opportunities for teachers to move internationally with IB and move outside of India. that's a wonderful opportunity for them and their family, because the packages outside may be very different to inside India. It can be life-changing for a teacher. To get a teacher trained up to that quality, though, where they appeal to international schools outside of India, takes time and it takes effort on the part of the school. So it's about using the skills that we're developing with the students we have, but understanding that it's an endless cycle of training teachers up. And so long as we retain them for long enough to have a positive impact, then I think that that's what families need to know, is that schools are focusing on that, knowing that there will be turnover, but managing the number of teachers changing and the amount of time they spend in a school is really important.
IB do not have homeworks. Myth or a fact?
Myth. If we look at the IB diploma, it's an expectation that every hour a child spends studying in school is matched with an hour of work outside of the classes. That's a lot, because your typical course for standard level is 160 hours, higher level is 240 hours over the course of 2 years. But I would expect a biology student in my biology class to be matching 1 hour with 1 hour. Some of that will be worksheets or activities that I've set them to do. Some of it should be reading around the subject. Some of it is just revision ready for assessments. So that's quite a lot of homework, especially when you take into account the 6 subjects that they do, plus the extended essay. When we look at the middle years program, there's a lot of projects, research projects that they will do. There's a lot of textbook exercises that the teacher will get them to do to prepare for the e-assessments. So we use that by way of homework to make sure that they're engaging in activities that are enriching their learning and advancing their understanding, not just recitation and preparation for exams. So there is homework in the MYP. In the PYP, again, we do send them home with activities to do at home, but they may be a little bit different. There will be maths practice papers and practice things that they will be doing to develop the skills, but there'll also be things like bake a cake, make a model of something that helps them to appreciate a creative side of things, but also is helping to inspire their learning. Because if you only send students home with worksheets or reading tasks, they will get quite bored with that. I'd rather know that students are going home, particularly in the early years in kindergarten, and spending an hour with an adult at home, hopefully a parent or grandparent or an older sibling, reading a book that they'll really enjoy. And I think that that will develop a love of reading, and you cannot be an inquiry-based learner without that love of reading.
IB do not have exams. Myth or fact?
Absolute myth. Every unit in the MYP and DP will have assessment attached to it. And a substantial percentage of that will be exam-based assessment, whether it's paper-based or an online assessment in an exam style, because fundamentally, the majority of the assessment for most subjects in MYP and for DP is done in an exam format. And therefore, we need to prepare students for that. Exams exist in the IB. We've not done away with them. There are other modes of assessment, presentations, video making, poster making, that are part of that process of assessment, because we recognize that not every child can memorize for exams. And it's also giving them a chance to shine with different assessment approaches.
You were talking about theory of knowledge and other assessments, how project-based assessments are done. Can you give an example of a child's project that really interests you?
I will focus on the personal project in grade 10, and I personally supervise some fantastic projects in the grade 10s that I've worked with for MYP. They've ranged from football skills online. So during COVID, one of the students for their project set up a YouTube and Instagram account so that they could do coaching videos that students who were stuck at home could access. So these were training drills that they could do either in a garden or even in an apartment, very basic skills to understand how to develop those. And the learning from that was gathered through a Google form that they asked for students to upload their own videos of how they developed the skills over time. And they also did a form asking for feedback on how they could do that differently. Another example was a fashion label. A student designed their own brand of clothing. They came up with their own comparisons of different leading brands that were already in the market. They took the best of those and compiled their own fashion designs. They set up an Instagram account to market it. That student has now been off to university to design, has come out of university, and now has their own brand that they are marketing on their own website. So that's a real example of how the IB can inspire a student through a project that develops and grows into potentially their own business at the end of the day. And that is what it's all about. It's about conceptual learning that you can apply in real life, and they are doing.
Can you give us an example of a project where a middle schooler does in the school?
So in middle school, in grade 7 or grade 8, students will take on a community project. They will normally work as a small team, and they will come up with a concept or an idea for a project that's going to have a positive impact on some element of the local community. Projects that I've seen work really, really well have been working with underprivileged children and helping to source resources such as books and leading reading programs so that they can improve the reading and literacy skills in deprived communities in Mumbai. We're working with a local school in Telangana, to help create a more artistic environment and providing them with resources to support creativity. So there's fantastic examples of middle school projects where they develop a sense of service that will pass through with them into their learning in the upper MYP, into grades 9 and 10, and hopefully become service projects for their IB diploma programs.
Oh, that's very interesting. As a neuroscientist, how important is reading for a child?
On a great many levels, neuroscience has enabled me to understand how the brain works, how we form connections in our brain. I think when I talk about addiction and device addiction, you can develop an addiction to things that are good for you. Books are good for you. And if a child is reading books that stimulate the brain in the right way, that enable them to form connections, whether it's reading about physical or human activities, whether it's about relationships through biographies, they're understanding the world around them and they can form connections in their brain. We talk a lot in the IB world about transdisciplinary learning. And when I look at my book right now, Jimmy Anderson's autobiography, he's talking about sports science. He's talking about psychology in this. That's transdisciplinary. It's bringing together an understanding of how psychology and science overlap in the world of professional sport. Any book a child can be encouraged to talk about with a parent. You can ask your son or your daughter what they're reading. You can ask them questions about that. What can they connect from that book to what they've been learning in school recently? And that can be applied to comic books. It can be applied to factual books, to fiction books, because it's broadening their mind. Any book that is new to them will help them see things slightly differently. But it's about the conversations you as a parent have with the child about what they're reading. And good IB teachers will be poking and probing the students about whatever task they've given them. What have you been reading for this? Where have you researched it? What have you learned from that research that you didn't know before? And that's how our brains work in terms of forming new knowledge.
Has parenting become difficult over the past few years, or as parents, we are taking it too much?
I think in the same way that students are challenged by, device overload and impact of social media on pop culture, on their own connections with the world, parents are faced with exactly the same challenge. We are being overstimulated as adults by what is good education. We're being challenged by what do we need to protect our children from. We're being challenged by the latest fads and trends in education. And I think that all of that does make it difficult as a parent to filter out the rubbish and work out what actually applies to me and my child. And it's difficult for a school to tell any parent what is the important things for them. It's difficult because parents typically may have 1, 2, 3 children. You're making decisions that impact the life of you and your child on a daily basis. And that's hard because you get one chance at being a parent. I think a better way to look at it is with many of those decisions, there's not going to be a right and a wrong. There's going to be things that give more enjoyment or less enjoyment. But trying to make sure that we focus on children that are happy, that will enable children to be successful. Piling on pressure and expectation because you've seen this course will give them access to this university, or this set of subjects will be the best way to become the best financial earner for your family. Those kind of conversations put so much pressure on the child that it can be really difficult to move forward with them in a way that they're going to be happy. So trying to focus on happiness, enjoyment, and memory making is probably far more important than focusing on grades, on academic achievement, on university admissions. That will all happen. And I think that's really, really a message that I would hope parents take away, is that focus on happiness, because everything else will come with that.
IB is only for rich and famous. True or false?
Well, far from it. I think that there are plenty of examples of families that are working really hard to afford the fees to get the children through an IB education because they understand what it means. There are lots of schools that have an allocation of scholarships to try and give opportunities for students who may not be able to afford the full fees for schools. And there are plenty of schools where it's a state, maybe not in India, but there are plenty of state schools in America and even in the UK that offer the IB as a curriculum for the community that may not be able to afford it. So I think it's a culturally diverse concept. I think here in India, because it's mostly private, well, it's almost entirely private schools that are offering the IB, that is a perception that can come across, but it is not an exclusive curriculum globally.
So sports is inclusive in IB curriculum. Who's taken up sports as a profession after that?
Yes, I have worked with a number of students who have been elite athletes as students and who've taken it into their adult life. I've worked with a student who's been a national show jumper for Thailand. I've worked with students who've been national skiers in Switzerland. I've worked with students who are currently working to become professionals in the world of golf and in chess. So the IB can be a very adaptive curriculum in terms of students who want to balance the opportunities that sports present them, as well as the academic rigor that goes alongside it. And because of the online platforms that we use, because of the flexibility in terms of timelines that we can generate for our students specific to the needs of the different subjects that they are studying, it does lend itself very well to that. So that is definitely something that it can be used for.
The other day, I read somewhere that our education asks questions and prepare us to give answers. But when we go out in the real world, the answers are all available. It's the right question that is important. How do you think IB fits in this?
Well, the IB is an inquiry-based curriculum. Therefore, by definition, we want students asking questions. We want students practicing asking questions from a very young age, so that by the time they are going out to universities to set up their own businesses, they are asking the questions that will enable them to find the right solutions, provide those solutions, and become successful through that whole process of asking questions. So it's definitely a part of the inquiry-based learning that the IB programs provide.
How can IB help to prepare professional athletes?
Well, that's a twofold question. I would say that the opportunities in most IB schools to become part of elite performance sports programs, so whether that's basketball teams, badminton teams, cricket teams, here in India, many of the IB schools are part of an organisation called the International Schools Sports Organisation, where there are games organised where schools will descend on one particular school or one city for a week-long sports programme of different competitions within one sport or a group of sports. That is one element of it. I think that there is also the fact that within the middle years programme, you've got an area of learning called physical health education, which involves skill development in different sports. It can focus in on one or two sports for those students. They get to understand the importance of sport for their health and how that their health and overall performance in a sport can be improved through strength and conditioning. They get all of that understanding through PHE and M1. And many schools are now starting to offer at the DP level something that can replace your biology, physics and chemistry as the main science that they study, something called sports exercise health science. And I've done the workshop for that, and I've introduced it in two of the schools that I've worked in already. And that enables them to focus on things like sports psychology, physiology, the measurement of performance in different sports, and they can focus on their own sport as part of their learning. So it can help drive up performance in a given sport, whether it's golf, track and field athletics, cricket. They can do that with the course, which is really exciting now.
That's really interesting. So if a child is passionate about a sport, the child can not only play the sport, but get deep into the study behind the sport, the science behind the sport.
Absolutely. In the same way that they can do in music, if they've got a passion for music, or if they've got a love of performing arts and theatre, they can focus on that within the IB diploma. So it really does keep doors wide open for students that want to do something a little bit different to your regular academic pathways.
IB students have to go abroad after 12th to study. Myth or fact?
Absolute myth. I know plenty of students that have stayed in India and gone on to do some amazing things at some great universities here.
Parents feel that children from IB cannot get into traditional professional courses like doctors and engineers. True or false?
I'd say that's a myth. I think that if I look back on my graduates over the years, I would say just as many have gone on to do courses like medicine or engineering, some of them here in India, many of them abroad, but plenty of them have gone on to those traditional pathways.
IB children can do only business after 12th. Myth?
A myth again. I think that plenty of students do go on and study business. Many students who go internationally or even stay at some of the more modern universities in India will focus on business and management alongside something they're very passionate about. Whether that's a science, whether it's a language, whether it's law, they will look at a combination of business and management and things, but that's often because of their family backgrounds and the fact that parents, grandparents have their own family businesses, therefore they have a natural interest in that. But it's not the only pathway. There are many, many options. The doors are wide open when you do an IB diploma.
What are the top 3 things that parents have to consider when we are selecting a school for a child?
First of all, is it a school that you can see your child being safe and happy in? Whether that's from the learning environment, providing the right opportunities and stimulus in terms of resources and facility for what they are going to be passionate about. I would say, do you have confidence is the second thing in the team that will be educating your child? And that involves meeting the principal or the promoter. It involves meeting some of the teachers, talking to some of the families that are already there, because that culture, that environment is going to mold your child for however long they're in that school. And I think the third thing is probably about the curriculum and whether the approach to that curriculum will suit your child and the abilities as you know them at that given age. And that might change. You might put your child in a school that you see is going to be the right fit for them as an early years toddler, maybe through primary, but you may feel that their needs change during their time in a given school. And that's an interesting dynamic for families to experience, because as your child grows, their personality will change, their interest will change. And that's why sometimes going to one school and staying with them forever may not work. But the most important factor of all of those things is how happy is your child, because that should be more important than anything else.
What are the top 3 things that I need to consider as a parent if I am looking at an IB school?
When looking at an IB school, I think that the trust you can place in the leadership team and the teachers is going to be a major part. I think the vision and mission of that school is probably the second thing, looking at that and making sure that the promises that are made are being delivered, and looking at the feedback that other parents have about the school. I think the third thing then is to make sure that the school are delivering the opportunities and the resources to make the IB happen. And that comes through the resources that the students have access to. It's the professional development of the staff, and they should be able to demonstrate that they are delivering what they promise. So it's a combination of those 3 things that will help you decide on the right IB school.
It was lovely having you, Mr. Tony.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed the very long conversation. It's been
I
great.
know. Thank you so much.